Welcome to LC Screen Talk. My name is Larry, and this is a revamp for a series favorite here at LC Screen Talk. A series we are now calling Underrated and Overhyped. In this series, I will be joined by a guest every episode to discuss films in particular genres that me and my guests believe got too harsh critiques, as well as others that got way overpraised when it comes to critical value. Now, for the evaluation of this series, we'll be looking at different critical scores and reviews from across the internet to determine the baseline of what equates to underrated and overhyped. Now, a disclaimer, these are just our opinions, just how we perceive the films to be. Clearly, we're in the minority when it comes to these scores, as we're going against the general consensus. But just remember, these are our own opinions, and we look forward to hearing which films within the genre you think are underrated and overhyped. So for the first episode, we're going to jump right into the deep end and discuss comic book films. And to help me out this week, I am joined by a great friend of mine, Anthony from the Silver Screen Analysis. So, Anthony, why don't you kick things off?
Hey, what's up everybody? I hope you're all doing great out there. I just want to start by giving Larry a huge thanks for inviting me onto his channel for this episode of Underpraised, Overhyped. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. We're going to be talking about comic book movies. I have 2 movies that I think are way overhyped. I have 3 others that I think are certainly underpraised, and that's just my opinion, of course, so let's get right into them. First up on my list is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 85% and a Metacritic score of 67. I can live with that Metacritic score, but 85% and certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes is a bit laughable to me when this one felt like nothing more than a stale sequel that was overly self-aware on almost every facet. I mean, the charm and the humor of the first movie was so excessive in this one, it undercut the dramatic impact of the plot repeatedly from start to finish and just didn't do it for me. Now don't get me wrong, it's not a horrible movie by any means. It provides adventure, stunning visuals, and the cast chemistry that we loved from this group, but with the plot that's a little bit more on the serious side between Star-Lord and his father, I just thought the relentless joke attempts made it feel way uneven. It wanted to be serious and impactful one minute, then cute and funny the next, and it just didn't work, and neither did force-feeding me Groot every chance it got to simply sell more toys. So not a bad movie, but certainly overpraised at being 85% and certified fresh. Next up is another overpraised movie, that being The Amazing Spider-Man with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 73% and a Metacritic score of 66. And I'll just get right to it, this movie didn't do it for me at all. I don't see how this film can be labeled as certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes when it's nothing more than a lesser copy of Sam Raimi's 2002 film. This movie really didn't do anything at all to expand the origin story. It went through all the same beats that we've seen before with this character, and Andrew Garfield, he is a great actor, but he wasn't a good Peter Parker, and I think he was very much miscast. The story didn't really capture the charm of Peter Parker, and even though some of the action, I will admit, is nicely crafted, it was still just bland. The villain and his story arc were lacking in appeal. Ifans was fine as Kurt Connors, but he was just missing that energy of Dafoe in 2002. The movie was fine, but lacking ambition, and despite what the title says, I didn't think there was anything amazing about this movie at all. Coming up next on my list, I have Batman v Superman with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 28% and a Metacritic score of 44, making it, in my opinion, greatly underpraised. No, I won't stand here and try to deny this movie's issues. The Martha line, Eisenberg as Luthor, the villain arc, the busy plot, they are all things that hindered this film, but 28% on Rotten Tomatoes seems a little bit drastic. This was a solid film with its own unique tone and some great comic book action. Some may not like the darker tone, but at least it's trying to be something different. To me, it kind of felt like a graphic novel version of the DC Universe, and I really enjoy it. I thought how this movie explores the ramifications of society knowing about the existence of superheroes and villains was actually nicely done. I mean, sure, it could have been written much better. Some of the character personas could have been changed up a little bit, but I still think it's a very capable film that creates its own atmosphere you can easily escape into. It has its highs, it does have its lows, but it certainly delivers a ride much better than what 28% would lead you to believe. Next up on my list is another massively underpraised movie, that being Blade, with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 55% and a Metacritic score of just 45. Not only do I think this movie holds up great over the years, I still think it's one of the all-time great comic book movies out there. It doesn't try to fit into the mood of a universe of films. It allows the movie to really fit the mood and atmosphere of its main character. It was edgy. Snipes was great in the lead, and the story, as simplistic as it is, provides some solid entertainment while exploring Blade's origin story at the same time. The movie has loads of fun, stylized action. Christopherson is a great partner to Blade, and Steven Dorff was a solid, charismatic villain for the film. The musical score is suited to the tone of the film perfectly. It has great vampire elements, action movie bravado from Snipes, tight fight choreography, and it's still a great movie to watch. I mean, people lost their minds when Mahershala Ali was cast as Blade, and I think that was primarily because of how awesome Snipes made this character look in this first movie. And we're down to the last movie on my list, and it's going to be Man of Steel, with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 56% and a Metacritic score of 45. And this is another film I think is massively underpraised. It has a ton of creative ambition, and it's really able to give us that same Superman origin story, but in a completely different way. It's darker, it's much more realistic for a comic book movie, and it really works to deliver all the action, spectacle, and some character growth at the same time. I thought Cavill is just perfect as Superman. He's okay as Clark Kent, but when you put the two together, it's more than enough to carry this movie. I thought Michael Shannon was a fantastic villain, and where some didn't like this movie because of all the collateral damage in the third act, I actually thought it worked to create some real ramifications for a Superman that was learning to become a superhero. And yes, it may have been gritty, it may have been a little bit melodramatic in places as well, but it's still the second best Superman movie ever made, and much better than 56% and a score of 45 on a Metacritic. And that's my list, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had a good time listening to my thoughts on these movies. And once again, a huge thanks to Larry for having me on the channel. It was much appreciated, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for joining me to discuss comic book films here in this series. I've loved getting to know Anthony over the time here on YouTube, and I'm glad we finally had the chance to collaborate here on the channel. If you're not already, make sure that you hit up Anthony on YouTube as well as Twitter, and I will put those links in the description down below. Subscribe to his channel, give him a follow. He has great, insightful content that I think you're going to enjoy. Now on to my selections. Oh boy. Well, I'm going to kick things off with a film I think critics generally went a little bit easy on, and that is Iron Man 2. So just looking, the certified Rotten Tomatoes critics really enjoyed Iron Man 2 and gave it a 73%, while the Metacritic approved critics only gave it a 57%. And I'm much closer to the Metacritics on this one, but generally, the MCU has 0 rotten films when it comes to Rotten Tomatoes, and very few films that come under that 60 percentile when it comes to Metacritic. Now, I think fans will have a huge debate over the fact that generally every single Marvel film in the canon has gotten positive reviews, and I definitely think there's a couple in here that aren't so great, and Iron Man 2 is definitely one of those. Overall, the film is just kind of a narrative mess with the villains, with the introduction, with Tony and his entire storyline. None of it comes together cohesively at all. We have so many wasted villains, and especially when you take into account the post-credits, it all just feels like it's time to introduce the Avengers and get this thing rolling, rather than standing on its own as a separate, solid film and a follow-up to a great comic book movie. So Iron Man 2 is one of the few MCU films that I think is way overhyped. Now I'm going to take us back, go a little bit classic, with Blade 2 as a film that is underscored, it's underrated. So looking at our two main aggregates, Rotten Tomatoes currently has this sitting at a 52%, while Metacritic has it at a 57%. And I think those are both really harsh scores. Actually, I could lump Blade and Blade 2 into this position because one, they're not really talked about in the modern day landscape when we discuss, really great comic book films. And two, I think both of them are really good comic book films. So, what is the deal? But the tone of Blade 2 is perfect. Wesley Snipes delivers a great performance yet again. The action is awesome, it's bloody, it's great. This delivered everything the first Blade gave me that I wanted and kept the same quality as that first film. Honestly, I would rate them about the same, and I think they both deserve to be fresh. Put some respect on Blade's name, y'all. Now let's go ahead and jump on over to Sony for our next overhyped film, and that would be Spider-Man 3. Currently, Spider-Man 3 sits at a 63% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 59% on Metacritic. And I just don't get it. Honestly, I know this is going to be a way unpopular opinion. Spider-Man 3 is my least favorite Spider-Man film. Period. I rank this even below Amazing Spider-Man 2. I know. I just had more fun with Amazing Spider-Man 2. Simple as that. But the fact is, neither one of them are good movies. And I think that at large, Spider-Man 3 was given a pass based on the strength of those first two films. It's a disjointed mess. It's tonally all over the place. All of these villains, all of these half-baked ideas. Tobey Maguire gives his worst performance in any of these films. Kirsten Dunst is also not great. Really, there's very little in this third film that works for me. The Sandman is pretty much that beacon that shines through. It has a couple of fun action scenes, but they absolutely slaughtered one of the most famous Spider-Man villains here. It all just didn't work for me. It's not a good cohesive film by itself. And as a closer to what should have been a fantastic trilogy from Sam Raimi, it just lets the great work of the first two down. So next up is a controversial choice for sure. But I'm going to say that X-Men Dark Phoenix is in fact underrated. Ugh. I know. Now, I actually don't think I would push this all the way up to a positive review, but it's more about perspective for me when it comes to X-Men Dark Phoenix. Looking at our review sites, Rotten Tomatoes has it at a horrid 23%, while Metacritic sits at a 43%. I don't think this is a good movie. I have a lot of problems with Dark Phoenix. However, I decidedly think it is much better than X-Men Origins Wolverine, and I think it is better and does the Dark Phoenix story better than X-Men The Last Stand, yet it is way behind both of those films when it comes to a general consensus. I'm just baffled as to why this one is just so much worse, was judged so much harshly than those other two films. There are several really fun, great action set pieces in this film. We have amazing performances. Michael Fassbender just kills it yet again, as does James McAvoy. And even Sophie Turner gives a wonderful performance. It's a little bit disjointed, but honestly, tonally, it stays pretty consistent and through. So while there are a lot of problems, especially if you're an X-Men fan, there's a lot of problems with how they do our characters. I just think it deserves to be at least on the level of The Last Stand. And right now, it's way beneath it. And then my final film is a revisit to Marvel Studios. And I think that The Incredible Hulk is overhyped. So this is actually my least favorite MCU film, followed very closely, pretty much neck and neck, with Iron Man 2. Mostly because I find it very dull. I find it really tedious to even get through. It doesn't have exciting moments. The CGI has not aged very well. And, as we know, it is virtually completely disconnected from the rest of the MCU, with one or two very, very insignificant exceptions. But if I'm being honest, I prefer Ang Lee's The Hulk to The Incredible Hulk. And Ang Lee's The Hulk is actually rated worse than the Marvel Studios' Incredible Hulk, which I find rather disappointing because for all of its faults and all of its problems, Ang Lee had a clear vision, had something to say, and had an interesting presentation to present it with, while The Incredible Hulk is just really bland, really factory made, and I find to just be one of the biggest slogs of the MCU to get through. So those are my picks, as well as Anthony from the Silver Screen Analysis picks for the most overhyped and underrated comic book films of all time. What did you think of our picks? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What other films would you like to throw into the mix? Make sure to leave all of your selections in the comment section down below, or you can hit both of us up on Twitter. Also, make sure that you're checking out the Silver Screen Analysis for great film-related content. Give him a subscribe and a follow while you're there. And while you're watching this video, hit that like button down below if you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel so you are always up to date on my latest videos, including each and every video of this series. I love you all so much for your continued support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!